on to our next team. Our next team is 5485 Gorillabots. They'll be presenting online from Corning, New York. They'll be talking about packaging and organizing your portfolio. Gorillabots is a community-based FTC team now in their 14th season. Backed by sponsor Corning Inc., they're known for steady performance and impactful outreach. They're on the winning alliance and earned Inspire second at the regional championship. At the World Championship, they ranked 14th overall and claimed the number one Alliance captain spot in the COA division. Everyone, please welcome 5485 Gorillabots.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna start presenting my screen. Go. Alrighty. Let's get started. So my name is Lydia Chung, and I'm presenting for Team 5485, the Gorillabots, and our topic, like you said, is packaging and organizing your portfolio. So a lot of teams struggle with deciding on the most important and interesting information to include in their engineering portfolio. And sometimes it's just hard to know how to put information compactly and effectively on each page. So a lot of people think, if you just throw in a ton of text and technical words and there you go. But that's not really what's going on. So honestly, judges only have around 5 minutes to take a look at each portfolio, and they won't be able to spend days reading like your beautifully written paragraphs about your differential intake or your PID code. And you can't rely on them to dig through your own work to understand your robot and what your team's about. So you've got to be clear in how to put the key information you want to highlight. So all of that starts with packaging certain information based on importance and priority. You want to have the most important information stand out above the rest, and you want to have easy to understand infographics, data, and popping colors. So it's easy to get lost in focusing on the robot and getting it done. But like the model for FTC, more than robots, your whole team is about more than just the parts you build. And if you want the judges to know that, you've got to be able to tell your story effectively. So today I'll be explaining the basics on how to lay out your portfolio, including the specific tips and tricks to make basic information shine and appeal more to the judges. You've got to design with intention and with efficiency. So here are some tips and tricks to get how to get your portfolio to stand out from the rest. So just to give a brief introduction about ourselves, we are a community team based in Corning, New York, sponsored by Corning Incorporated, and we're united by our mission to inspire young problem solvers, recruit the next generation of gracious professional innovators, and model hard work, dedication, and teamwork in everything we do. And I think that he already covered a little bit more about our qualification and how well we did at the World Championship, so I'll just skip over that. So first, just to give you a brief understanding of what we're going to be covering today, so I have 4 topics laid out about Portfolio 101, general structure, packaging, and some final tips. So starting off with Portfolio 101, you all are probably familiar with what a portfolio is, but just to reiterate and make sure we're all on the same page, portfolio is a concise summary of the team's engineering and team activities, the key resources for judge evaluation and winning awards, and it's supposed to highlight a team's design process, robot functionality, and overall team development. It should be well organized, visually appealing, and demonstrate an understanding of the engineering design process. So why is formatting such an important part of making a portfolio? So it's really easy to make sure the judges are just able to check off the boxes they have in their rubric. Because they have such a rubric, it's important to make sure your portfolio follows that exactly. And so they do just hit every single point. So it's very easy for them to just check off the marks. So they don't give them any reason to find error with your portfolio, and make it just easy for them to understand and convenient to read. Because like I said before, they only have around 5 minutes to glance at it, maybe only 30 seconds per page. So just making sure that everything is easy to understand and convenient for them to read is really important for hitting all those benchmarks. So like I said again, the important details need to stand out above the rest. So just moving on a little bit more towards general layout itself. So a really important thing to consider is choosing the right digital platform to create your portfolio on. So I strongly suggest whatever platform you use to transition more towards using Canva. I really feel like Canva is a great balance between being able to design things with interesting elements and cool colors, but also being able to put the information you need to have on your page. I think Google Docs and slides just aren't at the level that Canva is for being able to design with a little bit more efficiency and just making everything look a little bit better. So I just have some of the pros laid out for you on the side, but overall I think Canva is a better tool for you to use. And the rest of the examples I'll be presenting today will all be on Canva, as our team makes our portfolio and our notebook all on Canva. So what are the first steps you should take to just approaching how to make your portfolio in the beginning of the season? So I think that establishing sections or dividers, like what you're going to be putting in your table of contents, is really important. So are you going to be heading more towards going toward like an introduction, season plans, design programming? Are you heading more towards just filing each page based on awards. So it's really depending on which direction your team wants to go in. But after that, you need to decide how many pages to dedicate to each section. So is your introduction to be 1 page, 2 pages? Is your building section going to be 4 pages, 5 pages? And even though it's probably going to change throughout the season depending on how much content you get overall, it's important to set those boundaries in the beginning, just to make sure you're not, wishy-washy with the number of pages you're giving to each section, and just have an overall structure, and in the different flows for each section. Next is to create a footer and a header for all your pages. So you can see on the left, on the right side, I have the header and footer that we use for our team. So it's pretty simple. There's no need to be so complicated and technical. It just has the Enter Portfolio title and what the title of the section is, the general umbrella topic that you're going to be discussing, like design journey or programming or building, nothing too complicated. And then for your footer, you have maybe a little bit of a design element, including the page number and just the title of the season challenge. And then lastly is to choose a theme, design, and color palette. So as our example on the right says, the theme was last year was more like water, ocean. So accordingly, our design elements were like waves or simple blue colors. And our color palette, usually if their main color palette should fit your team colors. So our team colors are black, gray, white, and red. So our main color palette are those for colors. But your secondary palette also needs to complement those colors. So if you're an orange team, I would suggest not using a purple color to highlight some of your text or maybe some of the individual sections. It's better to choose a color maybe on the same spectrum. Like for a warm color, use warm tone colors. For a more cool color, use cool tone colors, and just make sure that complements each other and doesn't stand out too much in a negative way. So we use orange, yellow, and beige to kind of highlight a little bit more. Green, maybe not as a conventional sense, since red and green are opposite in the color spectrum, but green text is actually okay with what I'm about to show you. So just for initial layout, so how should you start off? I tend to start off with more simple shapes as a guide for your overall outline. So don't put too much thought in it. Just create a general idea of what you're looking for. And of course, don't force yourself to put the content into those specific shapes. Like you can see on the right, I just have kind of some gray boxes laid out. Because often the packaging itself is centered around the content you have. But just giving a little brief layout will help you get a general idea of what you want it to look towards. So you're not just like throwing a bunch of words and text on a page, but you have kind of a general flow of what you want it to look like. So moving towards more specific packaging and how to handle that. How do you turn raw information into packages? So like I mentioned before, you need something called an umbrella topic for each page, which is like building, programming, introduction. It's nothing too complicated. It's very simple, and it's just what the overall page will be about. And next, we need to group your information into subtopics. So these are a little bit more specific, and these will be, the titles, the headers for whatever package or section you're working with. And those can be like intake testing, drive-based upgrade. It's a little bit more with a little bit more detail than your umbrella topic, but still kept a little bit more general. And after that, you want to filter your text for relevance. So this is really important for making your portfolio. You want to keep just the key details. You do not want to put any extra work that you don't have to. And something I found pretty helpful is even using something like ChatGPT to ask it to condense it or only keep the key information and just kind of shave off the excess information that would just take away from your overall presentation. And then something you can do is visually separate your packages with borders, shapes, and colors. So as we can see on the right with an example from our own portfolio, these two sections are actually part of the same package on a page, but they are separated using two different colors for the surrounding barrier. So you can see that even though they're part of the same package, they are two different sections. So you can visually separate your sections within your packages using those kinds of things as well. And I also suggest you try to use only 3 to 4 packages per page, so it's easy to scan and easy to read. If you try to do like 8 packages, that's just doing too much. You want to keep it simple while still trying to do as much information as possible. And a little bit more about packaging sections. So as I mentioned before, sections can be separated in a variety of ways. Colored boxes can be used to physically separate things. Like you see on the right side, I have a gray and a white barrier that creates a very physical difference between the 3 different topics I'm discussing in these 3 different sections. You can use different colored text, like the white and the black have a stark contrast with each other, so you're not going to confuse the relationship between the 3 pictures. You can use the size of the section. So this is not the perfect example for the size, but because this is more long horizontally, you can choose to do a section that's more long vertically, or just to make sure that those different packages are very easy to see and distinct from each other. Something else you can do is the shape of the dividers itself. So, as these are longer horizontally, choose the one that's more long vertically, or, more of a square, more of a rectangle, or whatever you want to choose. And then, so why is that important? So it just makes the relationship between the pictures and the text clearer in those sections, like you can see in that example off to the right, you wouldn't be very easily confused which picture goes with which text because it is physically separated with that color as well as a different color in the text. And it just helps the relationships between the packages themselves become more obvious. So this itself, these three sections are part of the same package, but on the page itself, you can see there's a very stark contrast. So if I were to do a separating box in red, you would see that's a very big difference from the gray and the white I'm using off over here. So here's some page examples from our own portfolio to show you how that's coming into play. So we have very clear packages set on these pages as I highlighted in these various colors. So on the left-hand side, we can see that there's three different packages, but they're very separated from each other. So I'm using three kind of different colors. The first one is red with that complementary color of yellow. The second one, and highlighted in yellow, is those three different sections, but they're very clear and distinct from the other ones. And off to the far right, we have a very more vertical background, but that is also a little bit more separate from the rest. Kind of the same thing is going on the right side, where we have a very similar separation between the different packages, and it's very clear to see how things stand out from the rest and are separated specifically to the topic that they're discussing. So here are some packages, do's and don'ts. So make a general outline before jumping in and adding context. You want to maximize the space with header. You want to maximize the space you're using. You want to use headers, titles, and labels to make sure everything is very easy to understand. And the don'ts, don't leave too much empty space. Don't try to fit too much information. Like I said before, keep your descriptions brief and concise. Here's some examples of some good and bad packaging. Like I said, the one on the left, there's a lot of empty space. Don't really know what's going on. There's nothing that stands out to you. There's a huge wall of text that is just totally not what you're going for. And option two is a lot more condensed. You have very clear divisions in what you're trying to work with. There's just popping colors. You know exactly your eye knows where to go, and you're hitting those crucial marks that you want to hit on the rubric for the judging rubric. So we have very clear in text. It says risk mitigation, lessons learned from class competitions, which are both benchmarks on that judging criteria. So you want to be able to, even if the judge only has 30 seconds to look at your page, they want to be able to clearly see that you have all the information you need to just check off that box. Where if you move over to the left side, it's not really easy to see that. You kind of just see a bunch of walls of text and they don't really want to read that. If you gave me that to read, I'd say, I'm sorry, I don't really want to read that. So again, just try to focus more on packaging your information as concisely and efficiently as you can. And just some final tips before we close off. So here's some common formatting mistakes I often see when looking at other people's portfolios. It's using tiny, unreadable font size. There is actually a standardized font size you are supposed to use in your engineering portfolio. I believe it is 0.10. I'd still suggest moving towards maybe a 0.11 or 0.11.5, just because it's a lot being as big as possible is the best way to go. I'd say 12 is a little maybe too big, so probably 11 is right in the area you want to be in. Inconsistent font sizes in colors or clashing colors. We talked about the secondary and main colors already. Blurry, low quality images without captions. So just go to you want to be clear and what the images are. So if you want to look closer at them, they shouldn't be blurry. You should be able to read the different details, or you should at least explain what they are if you can't see them correctly. And be careful with pictures of code in CAD. I usually am a little bit more wary about including pictures of code. It's better to explain the code and use visuals than to try to just put lines of code on a page. It's not very helpful for the judges who might not understand coding to get a good idea of what your code is like. And same for CAD, I wouldn't be too large. I try to keep it more concise in a page and just describe what it is rather than just making it huge and expecting them to understand what that means. And just no direction or flow on a page. Like I said before, if you just kind of have a ton of stuff on a page, it's easy to get lost and not really understand what's going on. Versus whether you have packages that are very specific and contain different dividers that are very specific to that information. Too much or too little information, we already talked about that. Mix and unorganized topics. So make sure your subtopics very much go into your umbrella topic. That should all be related to the same thing. Do not go on a tangent about outreach on your programming slide, unless it's intentional, of course, which you probably already know that. No team roles are shown. I have seen that a lot. So say that you want to discuss a little bit about the people on your team as well as their roles and maybe accomplishments, and just overall ignoring the award criteria. It's very important to be able to check off those boxes for everything you're doing, because that's really how the judges approach it. They approach it very objectively. They're not very biased in terms of what it looks like. You want to just be able to cross out all that material and just make sure you're adhering to that rubric, and just again make sure it's very easy to skim and contain that information even without reading your giant paragraph of text. So lastly, just overall suggestions, I suggest you use infographics, timelines, charts, other visuals to make it easy to understand things as judges, and that's just more visually appealing as it is. Keep the packages minimal, but still like 4 to 5 up per page for clarity. I'd say, use a consistent color scheme tied to your team branding, so no rainbow color, unfortunately, unless that is your team color. And I'd suggest to stick to 1 or 2 fonts. Don't go crazy with the fonts. Keep them pretty minimal, like we see on our examples. We only use like uh, Canvas Sans, and some other font that's a little bit more bold, but you can use bold italics for emphasis, but try not to tilt towards sort of like the squiggly fonts or cursive fonts. And they're very hard to read and not where you want to be heading. And keep the decorative elements subtle, so they're supposed to enhance, not distract. So the wave that we have at the bottom of our page is a little design element that we threw in. It does not distract from the rest of the content itself, but it's just a nice little add-in. So just make sure the elements you're adding aren't all over the place or too much at the same time. Keep them minimal and concise, just like the rest of your information. So thank you again for listening to my presentation today. If you have any other questions at all, feel free to reach out. I added the Gorillabots email and the Gorillabots Instagram. So if you want to reach out, if you have any questions or you'd like us to look through your portfolio to give you some feedback, we'd be happy to help you and set up any time to discuss that. So thank you again so much for listening to my presentation, and I hope that was helpful.
Do we have any questions in person or online for Lydia?
Oh yeah, sorry. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer them now.
Okay, it looks like there's no questions. Okay.